I am also just an ordinary person. So I'm not going to have the numbers either end. Are you all like pressuring? Okay. My time is, look, I got to get this done in 8 minutes. So I think my argument, again, as an ordinary person in the community, my questions, I mean, I think when I heard about body cameras, automatically I'm like, oh, great. This is going to really help a lot of people, you know, because there's so much injustice, and if people could only see what was really happening. And then I thought, people see what's happening. Well, at least in my community, people see what's happening because it's our interactions with police. And it is your interaction with police. So it isn't that it isn't happening and people are not recording it, and it isn't that there's not enough information, it isn't that there's not enough footage. There's plenty to go. But in some communities, there aren't. And so transparency, documentation, all of these things, my argument is, depending on who in the community you're talking to, people see a real different need for police body cameras. And so today, what I really want to talk about is, a lot of the things that people have talked about and some of the research that we read is about, people are wondering about safety. They think it's going to increase. I think Amelia also talked about like the research that was done, and people think that it's going to increase transparency. They think that it's going to increase safety. Safety for who is my question? Safety for the police, safety for the community, and safety for folks, for those two communities are very different. And so if you talk about safety for police, like, I feel like you have a lot of things to keep you safe. You got a gun. You got a car to run into. You got like one of those sticks. You got you got mace, whatever you need, and most importantly, you got the law behind you. Okay. So you have a lot of things to keep you safe. And then talking about safety for community, like what do we have? Like we're just kind of in the community, and you know, and so I think that like when you think about that, it really matters and depends on whose community is going to be safer with body cameras. And don't be I think that there's a false security of what it can do for you. And so as somebody who works with a lot of victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, I can tell you that right away you're thinking like, oh, well, it's going to help. But a lot of folks who are violent, victims of violent crimes don't necessarily want to call the police anyway. Right. And then particularly in communities of color, like when we call, it's life and death. Mm-hmm. So now do you think, knowing that you're going to come to my house and I'm already afraid, that I'm going to call if I know you have a camera that's going to be recording me? Right. Do you understand the backlash of that, the retaliation from perpetrators when they know that something can be used against them? Yeah. Do you know how it can be re-victimizing to see that video again if you go to court? Do you see how it can be used to blame you? So, I mean, there is an example of a director of domestic violence who works with Latino and Latinas in Dane County. And what she said was, there's already fear and mistrust in the Latino community. There's already fear and distrust in the Latino community by calling the police. There are folks who are undocumented, who may not want you to like be taking photos of them. And then now, like, do you think they're going to call you if they're undocumented too? The other thing is that like their perpetrators can use the footage and use the whole incident to like really retaliate against them. The other thing is when you are in a domestic violence situation and relationship, well, you already know that there are certain things that you have to do to survive. Will those footages of you doing what you need to survive be used against you? And what we know to be true is that in many communities of color, they will be used against you. As a domestic violence advocate, I can tell you that when they come to a home or an Asian household, the primary aggressor, they may just take one. But when a lot of what we've known in black communities is that they will probably take both of you. Yes. Wow. And so will this protect black lives is what finally it comes to. And then the other thing about, so I would say that it actually does not create safety, safer communities. It actually silences those who really need police officers and help And so that's why, for me, intentions are great, but impact in communities are very different and it looks very different. And so for those who I work with, the impact is going to be devastating. So I say no to body cameras. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, I think that in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, there's like two communities living side by side.
Yes.
We're not saying police officers are bad. We're just saying that the institution that created that enforces that, is pretty bad to many communities of color.
Yes.
And that there seems to be this community in Madison that thinks that the police are naturally really good, the system is really good, or can be better. It just needs tools.
Yeah.
It needs training.
Yeah.
It needs the cultural shift, the cultural change.
Yeah. Right.
Then there's this other community like, no, they don't need that. They have all that. What they need is they need to stop harassing us. They need to stop criminalizing us, and we just want them to stop killing us.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think, and then the other thing is like people can say, well, no one's been killed. You know, very few people have been killed by the police in this area. Being locked up for life is also killing. Being locked up for most of your life is also killing. And so I think that we need to like really look at that. And then the last thing I want to talk about, one of the things that people talk a lot about is cameras, transparency, and accountability can build trust. What I say is, I work for a nonprofit. When you fail like 100%, people don't give you more money to like do what you're doing. One of the things that makes policing, one of the foundations of policing is trust. You're supposed to protect, you're supposed to help, you're supposed to create peaceful, you're all of that. When your department, your community, and your federal government says you have to wear this 24 hours because no one trusts you, because anytime you have an interaction, we got to know what you're doing. I don't say put $700 million back into that agency. You say it ain't working. Yes. So then you try to figure something out. So my last thing is, I think Em talked a lot about who has power. And I want to say, who has power to interpret the footages that will come out? Who has power to decide that what you saw, Tamir Rice, when you look at that, do you see a 12-year-old or do you see a 20-year-old? When you look at him, do you see a kid playing or do you see a thug that's playing by themselves at a park? Until the interpreter of that to seek for justice is the people that sees a 12-year-old for what a 12-year-old is, then it doesn't matter what footage you have, because in our eyes, we'll always see a different picture.